And this is Sunday, 5th of December 2004, talking to Dad.
Yeah.
We're talking about Duples and how he got into the personnel.
Yeah.
Now, tell me, Dad, about when you moved to Potter's Bar.
Well,
how did that come about?
I'm going to now. So, Mary was out one day at Kingsbury and bumped into her friend, who she had bumped into before, you know, during a period of time. I think, how are you getting on, Mary, you know? Well, she said, I'm fed up, or words to that effect. Why? She said, well, we're trying hard. By then, Mary's mother, began to get
Elsie. Yeah. Elsie.
Yeah, Elsie began to get a bit awkward towards Mary. And anyway, she said she was fed up with trying to look for a house, you know, to get some accommodation, didn't worry if it was to let or what. So she said, well, you move away from here? Oh yes, she said, I'd move away if I get a place of my own. So she said, well, what do you want? She said, anything, but I've offered key money and, you know, key money, do you know what I mean?
Not really, no.
You pay people if they've got a flat or something like that for the key.
Yeah.
So they would let it to you and they'd make money on the let and you'd get a place to live in. Anyway, she said, oh. Well, she said, my husband's building 4 masonettes at Potter's Bar. Would you like to go there? So we trotted off to Potter's Bar to see what they were like, and they were in the midst of being built. And I did have some photographs of it being built.
Yeah, I think I've seen them.
Yes. Anyway, ultimately, the place was finished, and Mary and me, we moved to Potter's Bar, and we got our first home, upstairs flat. Now, it was 2 blocks, 2 masonettes in each block, downstairs and upstairs. On the one side, Auntie
Vi? Auntie Vi, was it?
Auntie Vi.
And Sylvia.
Auntie Sylvia lived. And they took to us. And they certainly took to you. And
me? Yeah. Oh, I was about, was I?
Yeah, well.
You had uni by then?
Yes. And, well, we had uni when we were at Potter's Bar, yes. Anyway, they were ever so good to us. And then Auntie had some trouble with her brother, or whoever he was, at Walton, lived there, and she decided to...
Pop, I think his name was, wasn't it?
Yeah. She decided to go to Walton to live, and asked us to go as well. And I said, well, I can't afford to move or anything like that, you know, I couldn't afford to buy a place. So anyway, when Auntie came to sell her place, there was a bloke down the road doing a down for it. And I said, you're not to let him have it at that price, you know. When he comes next time, let me know and I'll be there. So he came and he was talking to her, and I was tipped off. In I went and stood, and he said, who are you? I said, I'm the next, and Auntie stood there by the window. I said, oh, I live next door. I said, I'm a friend of, that's what Auntie, this is Auntie, you see. Oh, he said, well, I'm not talking in front of a third party. I said, aren't you? I said, well, if you're not talking in front of me, you're not talking to anyone. Which he didn't like. Anyway, we got more extra money out of him. And also I had, when they bought part of Auntie's garden, the council just didn't offer anything for it. And I said to her, you should have a price for that from the council. So she took it up and she did. She got I don't know how much, but anyway, she got paid for it. Then she was on to us to move. And I said I couldn't. I said I haven't got the money. She said, well, I'll put enough in your bank for you to buy a house, if you wish. Pay me back as you can. So I immediately went to the exchange and had a chat with them. By then I knew the manager quite well, you know.
What, the Labour Exchange?
Yeah. And, well, I don't know of anything there. He said, well, I would inquire for you. Anyway, he got in touch with me a couple of days later. He said, well, there's nothing doing there at the moment. He said, but what I will do, I will keep my ears open, and if anything crops up, I'll let you know. Well, lo and behold, I don't think it was 2 or 3 weeks past, phone rang, popped down and see me. So I popped just down the road to see him. He said, would you go and live at Colchester? I said, Colchester? Where's Colchester? He laughed. I didn't know what Colchester was. He said, only there's a company there, part of the GECs, Woods of Colchester, he said. They want a champion personnel on recruitment. Have you done any recruitment? I said, yeah. I said, I've done some awkward recruitment as well, you know, with trade union and lots. He said, well, I'd like you to go down there and see what you can do. So the next day I said to your mum, I've got to go to, told her, I said, would you like to come? And she said yes. It was a bit of a bleak day in September. And off we went. And I stopped at the top of Tufnell Way and looked down. There was a lot of, not Nissen huts, but what huts did they call them? They built for inhabitants, you know, in the war.
Chalets, I suppose.
Yeah, but nice little places all along the top of the car park was. So I looked down there and there were these gates open and commissionaires standing there and building going on. The office was being built and there's a big pit hole of water about. And I looked down the distance and I said to your mum, I said, fancy working in that bloody place. You know, it looked shocking. And Mother said, well, look, you've come all this way, at least pop in and see them. I said, okay, you stay here. This would be about 11 o'clock in the morning. I said, you stay here, and I won't be long. I'll be here now. So down I went. Of course, the front entrance then was down the slope. You remember there was some steps up there.
That's it, where the surgery was, yeah. I remember it, yeah.
Yeah.
So, A block. A block.
Yes. So down there I went. Blimey, I hardly put my foot in the door when Miss Greengrass, who was on reception, in the foyer there, as you went up the steps into the foyer, there were 3 interviewing rooms, if you remember, on the corner. and the steps down to the duck shop, and here there was another office about a quarter the size of this. Miss Greengrass, she was the receptionist, you know. Anyway, I'd hardly stepped in there. "Oh, you Mr. Jephcott?" "Yes." I was in to see old Manders, and had quite a chat with him. And he said, "Well, I'd like you to look round the firm, the factory." I thought, "Oh, look round the factory, then away." So I didn't say anything about Mum. And he got the guide of Richer, and he walked me all round the factory explaining the different shops to me and that. Of course, D Block and
Wasn't there?
wasn't there. And took me all round, took me back to the office, and by then old Manders said, "Well, I'd like you to have a cup of coffee." And had a cup of coffee. Still hadn't said anything about Mum. By then it was getting a bit awkward, you see. From there, he said, "Now I want you to have lunch here." I thought, I couldn't hear. So I had a lunch with him. Then we had another talk, and then I left him. He made me an offer, which I argued. He misled me, the bastard. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. God will judge you.
Yes. He robbed me. They paid by a production bonus for everyone, according to your grade, and a salary. And he tacked what I would get on bonus onto the salary. Didn't make it obvious, but when you look back on the interview, you could see what he'd done, you know, and he was right in saying, "Well, I told you." So. By then, of course, I'd given my notice in at Duples, so I had to go. And I moved up to Duples, to Woods the Christmas. And
1955 or 56? 55, I think.
55, I think it was.
Because I was 2 years old.
Yeah. Well, that will give you the date of when I left Duples then. Anyway, I had to come before the family. They came a few days later. But
Well, what about a house? You found a house in Walton?
Oh yes, we'd been backwards and forwards. We were sleeping at Auntie's for a time, for a short time. And we saw this bungalow, and the agent said, "Oh no, it had belonged to the shoemaker, bootmaker, you know, in the village, the old boot repair bloke." Anyway.
So this was St Crispin's, 69 Woodbury Way.
Yeah.
In Walton-on-the-Naze.
Yeah. So we looked at one or two terrible places, and of course the floods had just been on, and walls were marked with a lot of them. Anyway, we went into this bungalow, as you know it, and as we got in, we both looked and said, "This is it," like that. But
and how much was it?
Well, I'm trying to think.
I think I remember you saying it was about £1,500.
Yeah, it wasn't much, about 2,000 I think, if I remember rightly. But the agent said, "No, you won't have that, you know." I think they wanted about 4,000 something. I can't remember now, although I've got the papers at home. I'll have a look at that. And anyway, the estate agents, no, wouldn't hear of it. You see. In the end, Mum wrote to the owner of the property And he, no, did I say 2000? Yes. Mum wrote to the owner and he got back to me. He said, I can't let it go for that. He said, but providing you haven't been to an agent, I will. He said he'd like to get rid of the place, but he would. I said, well, unfortunately, I've been to an agent.
And he wouldn't accept it?
I'll send you the keys. He said, and I'll let you have it. He wasn't bloody, were the agents annoyed? Not hard. So we got it, and we moved in and developed it like that.
And you started your career at Woods of Colchester?
Yeah, and most unhappy I was, because I was known so well. If I said anything, gave an instruction at Duples, wasn't queried, because I was assistant personnel manager there. By the end I'd finished my studies, and I had a woman in the personnel department which I'll talk to you about one day. She was terror.
Mrs. Wendon, was it?
Yes, and she used to report everything back to...
Who was the managing director then?
Mr. Geoffrey Woods. And she was a terror. There was a lot of... She was a horrible woman. And treat people like dirt. And she'd report everything. If Manders was away, as soon as he came back, she was in his office looking up a little book. Jephcott sneezed twice, you know, things like that.
Yeah.
And people everywhere. You couldn't find anyone in Woods that liked her. Anyway.
And you were 40 years old then?
Yeah.
And how was things at home? What had you? Trudy wasn't born, was it?
No, no, nor were you.
Yes, I must have been. Yes, I was 1955.
Of course you were.
I was 2 years old.
Of course you were.
And presumably Trudy was almost on the way.
That's right. Mum was carrying Trudy, I think.
So Trudy was born in 1956.
Yeah, something like that. I can't remember the dates there. You'd have to talk to Una. She'd know them off. Anyway, Mrs. Wendon obviously had given the instruction, anyone coming in for a job should go to her first. Now, she'd never let the foreman see them or anything like that. She'd make up her mind whether they came in or not. Anyway, I got fed up with this. So I phoned up with the, what do you call the chief foreman? The head foreman. But never mind. That was Mr. Coles. I said, recruitment. Could we arrange for me to see? And he looked, he said, yes, do that. So from there on, people that came in for a job came to me. Shut her out from there. But anyway, I was unhappy because they were all Colchestrians. I was a Londoner, you know. But I went home I can see it now, I stood just inside the door, grinning all over my face. And Mum said, "God, what's the matter with you? You're looking happy." I said, "Yes. Someone called me Jeff today." And from that date onward, I got to know people. And they got to know me, and I made some darn good friends from there onwards. And I was a happy little soul. And people began to like me for some reason. And that was it. And I'll finish it there for now.
Okay, leave it at that, and who knows, find something else to talk about.
Yeah.
Another day. Thank you. This is Sunday, the 22nd of May 2005 at Ditchling, Fordham, with Dad talking about his life. Now, last time we left off we were talking about Woods, Dad's career at Woods. And
Can you remember what we were saying about Woods?
Well, I think we'll leave Woods alone for a while, but what we really wanted to do is go back. We haven't spoken at all about your scouting career.
Oh, right.
So, could you tell us really how you got involved with the Scouts and how you went on to be very active in the Scout movement? So, in your own time.
All I can say about scouting was that I was always keen on, even from the Cubs. You see the dates again. Anyway, as a young lad living in London, I joined the Cubs when I think I was 8 years old, something like that, and a troop run by a lovely Cub mistress, Miss Newman, and the Fifth City of London troop, who had rovers and scouts, as was the custom in those days. Gotta get this thing. I remained in the Scout movement I've got dates at home.
Up to the war?
Yes, up to the war virtually.
Oh.
Practically, I had something to do with the Scouts.
Although you were 25 then,
yes.
Or 24.
And there was a break. Oh, I was in the Scout movement until the outbreak of war. The outbreak of war.
So obviously that came to an end, so...
Yes, that came to...
And obviously we've spoken about the period during the war, so...
Yeah.
Okay, imagine you're back home.
Yes. So obviously I had to join the army and spent several years abroad, and on my return I was married to Mary, and we went to live at Potter's Bar, our first home.
That's it, yeah.
And our neighbour we became very close to. The two ladies, we looked upon them as aunties, and one of them was a guide mistress.
That was Sylvia or
Sylvia.
Violet? That was Sylvia. Sylvia Turl.
Yeah. And she was obviously in contact with the local Scout group, and that happened to be a number 5 group, Potter's Bar, the 5th Potter's Bar, which was a closed group because it was a church troop, and we had to observe the services of the church, and where Scouts were choir boys, obviously they couldn't have time for camps and things of that nature. The old vicar didn't like it very much, but still that was part of the bargain to if you wanted to be in the Scouts. I said, but Sylvia, being so close to the local Scouts, asked me if I could do anything to help them, instruct them, because they were short on people they were happy about to run the troop. which I did, feeling that, well, if I could just see some Morse code or something like that, that'd keep them occupied. But of course, as I expected, as time went on, I was asked to become a scoutmaster again and take out a warrant. The warrant which I still have in my possession, which also is now a permanent pass for scouting. That was for the long service that I did, no doubt. And I enjoyed my scouting in those days. And two of the, I had nothing to do with the Cubs at that time. That was run by a lady who I can't remember of much. But how the devil she could manage those Cubs, I do not know, because I did take charge of them for 2 or 3 weeks while she was on holiday, and I couldn't manage to control them. But anyway, nevertheless, I went on with my scouting, and they asked me to take a warrant, which I did eventually, and became very involved in church activities, things like that, jumble sales, collecting the stuff as you would have to for jumble sales, and all sorts of activities I took part in, which is too vast for me to go through individuals. But
give me some names of some of the people.
yes, two young men that I had, of probably, if I remember right, around about 12, or yeah, about the age of 12. Well-educated boys. One went to St Albans School. I'm not sure where the other one went, but quite a good school. And I remember both of them, their mothers and fathers, writing to me saying that they were more interested in scouts than in
schooling, probably.
Yes. In what did you
schooling?
Say? Yes, than in schooling. But anyway, you put a stop to that, and they did react in the right way and take more interest in their schooling. And I began then to pick up, and I feel I got a bit of a reputation among the parents, that they used to come to me with some of their problems, which surprised me. But this went on, and these two boys were very, very keen indeed, and we got up to all sorts of exercises. For instance, one of them being that we would take a group of boys in a car at night. Obviously, we had permission from their parents to do this, and we had to give them all documents to say their names and addresses and things of that they could show, and if the police stopped them, they could show that, and the police could phone up at their homes, or they'd phone up me, and they'd be safe in that respect. We'd take them some few miles away, see that they had a meal before we dropped them, which would be about 11 o'clock at night, and give them a shilling, and whatever other money they had, that was up to them, but the troop gave them a shilling, and chuck them out loose into the dark, and they had to find their way back to headquarters, which they were very successful at. But Barry and Michael, the two very keen boys, who incidentally both became Queen Scouts and went to Windsor to have the scarves and things handed to him. I think it was by, I've got a feeling it was the Queen, I can't be certain, which leads me to another instance. Is our scarves that we wore as a troop. We wrote to Her Majesty's, what do you call them, the secretaries, whether we could change our scarves, neck scarves, to the royal plaid, Stuart plaid. The Queen was not, in replying, her secretary said that the Queen received our letter, and by all means, if we wish to change, it's not normal, but we could do so. But it was also pointed out that the Queen hadn't said yes or no, but we took advantage of it, and we had plaid scarves. And time went on. I used to take the boys to camp. We had some very nice camps. During this time, one of the assistant scoutmasters left us. Another scoutmaster I was asked to help with some reserves, the local postmaster, who become very dominant indeed, and wanted it all his own way, and began to give the boys £0.50 if they passed a badge. And his own son being in the troop, he got a bit of preference from him. But anyway, it finished up that he robbed the post office, and that was the end of him. But he'd got a bit of a history, and the district commissioner who asked me to give him a chance and take him on never told me that, but that's why he particularly asked, would we give him a chance? In scouting, which we did. I said, but it was a very awkward time for me. He started to, unfortunately, he interfered with the cubs. When I say interfered, I mean started visiting the cubs and all that. Well, he had no right to do it. And the...
What was his name? What about Mike and Barry, their names? Surnames?
Well, Aston and...
Michael Aston.
Michael Aston and Barry Woods. So...
Tell me about the funny story you told me where you had your hat and you had to duck behind something, behind a screen or something with a top hat on. Was that a scout event?
Oh yeah, that was a fete that I did for the church.
You got a bump on the head?
I'll tell you about that. But anyway, I've forgotten where I got up to.
This fella interfering with the cubs?
Oh yes, and one lunch hour at home my phone rang, and the cub mistress was on the phone, because by that time in my service up to date I'd been made Group Scoutmaster, and the cubs and the scouts became my concern. And she was a bit upset because Ferguson, I think his name was, she was upset because he'd been interfering in the evening meetings, and I was cross about it because we'd had trouble with him earlier on, giving the boys money, and pointed out to him that you didn't do these things, the boys did it for their own pleasure. And I said, well, if that's the case, and I said, I'll just cancel his warrant, if that's, because I'd been told that, you see, if I had any. by the district commissioner, who I knew very well indeed. And the district, what happened there was that I got a letter from the district commissioner, and it transpired, I'm sorry, I go back a little here. One lunch hour, after the complaint from the cub mistress, I had to phone her back, that was it. I phoned her back, and apparently this chappie was the postmaster, and he was just shutting his phone off to go and have his lunch, and amazingly he heard all the conversation. And the next I knew about it was that he had written to the district commissioner and malign me quite a bit, that it wasn't right, that I should do this, that and the other and all that. And the district commissioner, in fact I've got the letters at home, wrote to me and pointed out and showed, sent me a copy of the letter. Oh, his name was Finley, by the way, Finley. Sent me a copy of his letter, what he'd sent back to him. And he pointed out to him that I had a vast experience in scouting, which he hadn't, and he shouldn't do these things, you know, he knows that. He pointed all his shortcomings out to him. And that set the ball rolling, you know. I had difficulty with. Anyway, I had to get rid of him in the end. But it was never the same. And incidentally, he fixed up a bogus break-in to the post office. And of course he got caught and shoved away. So that did take him out of commission.
Dodgy character.
Yeah. But life went on, and we carried on with helping the church where we could. And on one occasion where we were running a fete, I managed to borrow from my company sideshows, real sideshows, you know, and it was a real pucker-do. And one of the sideshows was actually one fixed up by me, really. And that was a shelf with china on, that was one of them. And we used to write to lions and people like that, had they any broken china, and they were very helpful. And we'd have those up on shelves, and let my fathers get over some of their inhibitions by having shies at the china and all that. And from that we also had a system where we had a wire barrier put up in the front of all this, and I would walk behind the barrier with a top hat on, which we scrounged from the undertaker. He used to give us hats. And unfortunately for me, the shield was a little low down, and it would come down about an inch, parallel with my forehead. And one of the fathers said to me, "I'd knock your head off with this." I said, "You never would, you'd never hit the darn thing." Of course, I didn't know about this. And he started setting them up, and suddenly he threw one. And I realised it was coming straight at me, and I put my head down like that. And where the brim of the hat, and the hat was like that, it hit me there. And it took the skin off. Of course, I wonder where I've got to. I said, but it was a bit of fun.
There's an old photograph of that, isn't there, somewhere in one of your albums?
I think so, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Why, you don't want the photographs, do you?
No.
I can dig them out if you
Just
did.
an explanation of one of the pictures.
In fact, I've got an idea that I've got a picture of you at a camp.
Mm.
Yes, I'm pretty certain it's you.
Mm. So scouting sort of came to an end then when you moved from
Yes, I'll come to that.
Borders Bar.
Anyway, eventually it meant that through business and my self getting a superior job, I had to leave Potter's Bar and move to Colchester, company belonging to the GEC. I started there as an employment officer in the personnel department, and I enjoyed every minute of my work and gradually progressed in the personnel department until I became senior personnel officer and did well for myself. I said then and from there I still kept contact with the scouts. Occasionally I'd take a uniform to work with me and put it on and catch a train and go to London for TOC H and associations such as that, various other events that came on. And I was then invited to go to Potter's Bar for a dinner that the Scouts were giving, which I did. And going there, really what they wanted, they presented me with the thank you badge, which I still have in my possession. And I've retained contact with Barry and Michael all these years since then. They come to me once a year. At least Michael does, but he travels abroad a bit, so he can't do the same as Barry. But Barry gave his life up to scouting, and when the general attitude of scouting among the public weakened a bit, of course the number of scouts in existence dropped quite a bit. And Barry, who was a organiser for the Scouts, he did have a title, I know, in Norfolk. But he and his wife still come to see me once a year. Well, they come more than once a year, but one of those visits, if they can, they try to bring Michael with them and take me out to lunch, and they do that. And Barry, it's a long while since I ever came across such a sincere young fellow. But I would like to add to that, he always had ideas of what we could do and what we couldn't do. He was a bit of a wizard in that, a great chap. But he inherited the leadership from me when I left. And I would like to bring us to the question of our first child, which was a girl. Mary, my wife, was very keen on having a family. And for some reason, I don't know why, we always said we wanted 4 children. And our first child was a girl, Una, who we named Una May. Una because my father used to call mother Eunice or Una, and her own mother's name was Eunice May, and we had a christened Eunice May. And she was born and on a Friday night in the local hospital where she'd been working in the maternity hospital as the secretary to the chief gynae. And she was born on the Friday night, and of course I wanted to get away on Saturday morning to see her and the baby. And this coincided with me having a group of scouts passing their cooking test at the back of the church hall. Anyway, I got Barry to take responsibility for them because I said as soon as I finished at the hospital I'll get back as quick as I can. I said I went and saw Mary and saw a delightful little baby as well. I said, and then anyway, as things went on, I went back to the church and the cooking. As I turned the corner of the building where the cooking was going on, Barry looked up and saw me and said, "All right boys, you've all passed." He could tell by my face I was so happy that we'd had a baby.
You wouldn't fail any of them. You wouldn't have failed any of them.
He wouldn't fail any of them. So, and that was that. And then eventually, of course, I left Potter's Bar, the usual parents meeting to see me and thank me and a little present, things like that. And I left Potter's Bar. When I got to Colchester, well, the reason I really started looking for another job, going back on what I said, although I improved my position, the basic push that sent the family to Colchester and that area was the two ladies who lived next door to us at Potter's Bar, and we looked upon as aunties. And during that remaining period at Potter's Bar, we had a young fellow born, our second child, which happened to be Jess. We named him Jess because I had a friend with the name Jess as well, and Mary, my wife, had an uncle, Jess, that we decided to call him Jess. My family, you are Arthur, aren't you? Jess Arthur, aren't you? Yes. My mother wanted you called Arthur, and I didn't. I wanted you Jess. So, as a compromise, we called you Jess Arthur, which we've always been pleased with. I don't know about Jess himself. I think he's happy about it. And he was born at Potter's Bar. He was born. I'm not sure which hospital you were born in.
Barnet General Hospital.
It was, yes, where Mary had been working.
In 1953.
Yeah.
And Una was born in 1950.
Yes.
And you came to Colchester, I think, in 1955.
55, that's right. Anyway, we prospered in a way, but it was the two aunties that moved to Walton-on-the-Naze. And they were so keen to get my family there to be with them that in fact, they helped us cash-wise, particularly the older auntie, who...
now that was Violet Harris and...
Yes. I can't think of...
Sylvia Turl, that's it.
Turl, that's right, Sylvia
That's right.
Turl. Who unfortunately died eventually at Walton, and she was the youngest of the two. We never thought that she would pass out because she was a very active guide mistress, and but anyway, that's what happened.
So what about more children then?
Yes, well, I'll get round to that. And anyway, that was 2 children we had on the way. And Jess, the vicar, came into the scout group after Jess was born, and said to me he would like to have a talk with me over in the manse, if you like to call it that, Charles the Martyr Church, Potter's Bar. And he said, would I come over and see him after the scout meeting that night? And